Tell me real quick, as we get ready for Foot Locker, I mean, this is really about Dick's, which is going to be reporting tomorrow. What are you paying attention to?
Yeah, so Foot Locker has really hurt over the last 24 months. They were doing really well coming out of the pandemic. They kind of benefited like others. When consumers were flush with cash and willing to spend money and not really looking for discounts. But kind of since that, fiscal stimulus faded, and consumer savings is down. We really, we saw Foot Locker kind of struggle in the last few years. And we just think that's a result of kind of the long-term headwinds that they're facing. They're typically in malls, or we like to call it on mall. And we've seen that industry, kind of decline, a slow decline over the last 20 years. And we think that's kind of, just the result of the industry they're in, and they're battling, multiple headwinds there, and then in the direct to consumer channels that a lot of these, brands are really trying to, bolster.
So, will you pay attention to the earnings call tomorrow for Dick's because they're going to acquire Foot Locker to see how they're going to address the issues you just raised for Foot Locker?
Yeah, we think, overall, if anyone were to acquire Foot Locker, Dick's is a great, company to do that. They've got the leading technology in their space. They have a very similar business. They sell a lot of footwear, and we just like their distribution. Yeah, so we think Dick's is kind of the best company to acquire Foot Locker. They've got a similar business. They sell a lot of footwear, and they're a leader in their sub industry in terms of their omni-channel approach, right? So they do a really good job of having a really good online platform, mobile platform. Where you can place orders and have them fulfilled in the store. They can ship it from their stores, and they can ship it from other distribution centers as well. So Dick's has done a really good job doing that in the last few years. And so I do think if there is a company that can turn around Foot Locker, it is Dick's.
I'm no expert in these matters, but if I hear you correctly, Dick's is going to have to close several, I would imagine hundreds of Foot Locker stores. I mean, if the mall business just isn't there and it's not really part of the business model for Dick's, it would seem to me Foot Locker, its days are numbered.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think there are some, malls and areas that have done well for Foot Locker. We think overall the mall business is declining, but there are obviously some exceptions to that. Foot Locker has been closing stores in the last 10 years, and kind of rationalizing their fleet. We don't see it as a growth story. Obviously, they're not going to come in and open a bunch of new Foot Lockers. And if they do, it would be closing the mall locations and opening new ones that are kind of in the same locations as Dick's, kind of the off mall locations, the regional and local, shopping centers.
Um, as an investor, Dick's is going to get, not Dick's, rather, Foot Locker is going to be acquired. Would I even pay attention to this earnings report? Why would I pay attention to this earnings report?
Yeah, it's really, you're right. This earnings report really doesn't matter for Foot Locker, and even for Dick's, right? So I mean, you've seen what's happened to Foot Locker over the last 3 or 4 quarters. They're dealing with a lot of stuff, obviously tariffs right now. They've seen the decline in sales recently, profitability's down. So really, this quarter in the grand scheme of things doesn't mean too much. Dick's has already seen this. Their recent quarters are not great. And they're looking, forward. They're looking as a strategic investment, I think, more than an operating efficiency financial investment. So I really do think, over the long term, Dick's can turn the company around, and I don't think they're looking at this quarter specifically, with a close eye. I think honestly, it's more of a long term strategic approach, and Dick's will be paying attention, but they've seen what they're going to see from Foot Locker over the last few quarters already.
When can you give me a timeline as to long-term approach? Is that 2, 3, 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's probably a 3 to 5 year kind of turnaround for Dick's. They're going to have to spend time and money over the next 1 or 2 years, kind of revamping, Foot Locker's website and how they their distribution. They're going to join a lot of those things, I would think, and that doesn't happen in a year. It usually would take a few years, and before you see really good financial results, it's probably going to be 2 to 3 years.
And regarding the acquisition, is there a timeline when we expect the deal to close?
You know, it, they all take a little bit longer than expected, I think. I don't think you'll see a lot of DOJ involvement in this. I think this is, Foot Locker has been declining for a while. So I don't see why, the government would get involved here. So, I think it would be a pretty quick close. It'll be interesting to see. Usually they do take longer than you expect, but end of year, maybe early next year.
And in regards to Dick's, why would they, or I realize it's speculation, but what do they gain by getting essentially the shoe store, Foot Locker? I mean, they sell shoes at Dick's already.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of it is economies of scale, so they're going to obviously be much bigger now. So they'll have more leverage with Nike and some of the other shoe brands that they carry. Yeah, so I do think you know Foot Locker has generated a lot of free cash flow over the last few years, and I think they can continue to do so. I do think, this does make Foot Locker bigger, and I think they'll get some more leveraging power with some of the brands that they carry. Nike. I think Foot Locker has a big deal with Nike. I think between Foot Locker and Dick's, they'll have a lot of leverage there, and then some of the other brands as well that they carry. I think that'll kind of bring a lot to the deal.